Part 3 of the nervous system. Now we're looking at actually how those nervous impulses are passed along. Importantly in this, the difference between a voluntary response and a reflex. So, there are 3 main types of neurons, and we're going to talk about their structure a bit more in the next one, but we'll look here at where they are and what they do. So, firstly, you've got your sensory neurons. Those are found mostly in your peripheral nervous system, and they send messages from the body to the central nervous system. Then you've got your interneurons, now otherwise known as connecting neurons. These ones are within your central nervous system, and they act as the messengers between the sensory and the next type, the motor neurons. So your motor neuron, again, now we're back in the peripheral nervous system, and they send the messages from the central nervous system to the body saying, do this. So basically, to perform an action, you first get a stimulus. That stimulus is picked up by the receptors, and they send a message in your sensory neuron. That sensory neuron links to an interneuron in your central nervous system. That interneuron will then link to a motor neuron. And that motor neuron connects to something that can do something, which we call an effector. So it might tell a muscle to move, it might tell a gland to release something, but it causes an action or a response. Okay, so we call this the stimulus response model, because you start with a stimulus, you end with a response. Okay? And it goes sensory, then inter, then motor neuron. So, for example, you might see a scary dog. Your sensory neuron, your sensory receptors first of all, indeed in your eyes, would see the dog. Your ears might also hear it. And that would activate your sensory neurons, and they will send a message to the central nervous system. So from your eyes to the brain. That would then link through to a motor neuron, and that would send a message to the muscles. So it might send a message from your brain to your legs saying, you want to get out of here. That dog's scary, let's get away from it. The action would then take place. So you might run away, or your brain might be being a bit more sensible and might be saying, actually, it's better here to stand my ground, or it's better to climb a tree. Who knows? So you have your sensory input. Those are integrated within the central nervous system, and then your motor output, your kind of response. What's really important here is the key which is communication. So your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system must communicate for this to work. Okay? The interneurons, which are in your central nervous system, which are the bits that are highlighted in red here, they're the ones that do the communication. So we start in the peripheral nervous system, stimulus is received, then we go into the central nervous system. So the interneurons pass a message along, and in many things your brain thinks about it and decides on the appropriate response. Motor neurons then receive the message, relay the information, and then we have a response. Sometimes though your brain isn't involved. Sometimes it's just your spinal cord, and that's where we have an involuntary response. And we do that when it's something really important that you respond quickly to it, and really it has to be a direct response. So it's a reflex arc. Okay? So we're still going stimulus through to response. We're still going stimulus, then receptor, sensory, inter, motor. But the difference here is that interneuron is in your spinal cord. Okay? So if the interneuron's in the spinal cord, it means you're not doing any conscious thought, you're just doing an immediate response, and it's always the same response to the same stimulus. So the example that we're using here is if you step on Lego, you will automatically scream. Now, I think the teacher who put this together has small children, particularly boys, who like to move Lego all around her house. Probably a more common one would be if you reach your hand out and touch something hot, you immediately pull it away. Okay? So, if your hand touches a hot plate, then your skin will detect the change in temperature. That's your receptor. The sensory neurons send a message to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord sends a message to the motor neuron. Your effector is the muscles in your hand that move, and the response is that your hand moves quickly away from that plate. Your brain isn't involved in this response, but it does know shortly afterwards what happened, and it goes, oh yeah, that's hot, maybe I don't want to do that again. It might take actions to cool your hand if you've actually burnt it. It might take actions to cool down the plate or grab a tea towel to hold it in the next time. Reflexes are really important, partly because they cause a quick response in response to danger. They include and improve your likelihood of survival. Now, if you want to know more about reflexes, then hop on to this link here and you can watch a video about all the different reflexes that you're born with, all the ones that you've been doing your whole life, some of which you may not be aware of.